Thank you, everybody, for coming. I always say everything goes better with bacon, so we're already off to a great start. She did say, where's the feedback corner? Is it this one or this one that I'm supposed to stay away from? I can hear a little bit of it. I'll stay here. Okay. So before we kick off, again, thanks everybody for coming. It's been a wild ride. I've been with the company, gosh, from the beginning, before we even launched our first product. So we opened a factory in 2012 in May, which is right when I started. And then we launched our first product in March of 2013. So why build a watch factory in Detroit? A lot has happened in those 5 years since we opened the factory. Our founder isn't from Detroit, but he was really interested in building a watch in the US. He wanted to do it in a city where he could make a difference and create jobs. So Detroit, of course, came up, not because they're necessarily known for making watches, but because of the manufacturing legacy that exists there. So why build a watch factory in Detroit? Why not accept that manufacturing is gone from this country? Why not let the rust and weeds finish what they started? Why not just embrace the era of disposability? And why didn't we buy a warmer coat before we moved here? Through 3 Detroit winters, we've asked ourselves these questions and worked not to find our answers, but to build it.
The question isn't why you built a watch factory in Detroit. It's why you built one anywhere else. This is the city that made this country, with its steel, with its skill, with its labor. It's why we're here, reestablishing trades that haven't been seen in this country in a generation or more, creating goods that will last a lifetime, if not longer, knocking rust off the American supply chain with every chance we get, crafting our leather goods next door to where we build watches, hand-painting our watch dials just down the street. All in a city that's shown over and over again that the hard things get done when the stakes are higher. It's a tall order to return to form, but it's what hundreds of Shinola employees work towards every day here in Detroit, where we believe in the beauty of industry, the glory of manufacturing. In a city where we know there's not just history, there is a future, where we are working to create a community that thrives through excellence of craft and pride of work, reclaiming the making of things that are made well. Shinola.
So when we first made that video, I remember at the end there, you saw that big group of people. The first one had about a dozen people in it, and I remember we had to like pull kids from CCS, that's the building we're in, it's the College for Creative Studies, to make it look like there were more people than what we were. And it's really funny how much we've grown, pretty amazing how much we've grown. So we're 600 plus employees. Of that, 300 are in Detroit and 200 are in manufacturing. As I mentioned, we're housed in the College for Creative Studies. As far as we know, it's the only instance where a factory and headquarters is housed inside of a design school. There's amazing benefits to that. We have a program with the school where we sponsor design classes. We've hired roughly 8 students from that program. Some have actually moved on to amazing jobs. One person's at Everlane now, another person's at West Elm, both in San Francisco. So it's really amazing to be tapped into talent literally in the same building. We're partnered with a movement maker out of Switzerland called Rhonda, so they helped us build the factory and also do the training. The majority of the people who work in our factory have not worked on watches before, so we really invested in that training. And another cool story, and I mean, there's history around every corner in Detroit. This building in particular was an old GM center, GM design center. So it used to be called the Argonaut building, and we named our movement the Argonite movement. A movement is what makes the watch tick. We assemble both the movement and the watches in Detroit. The components come from overseas. As you can see, there's many tiny parts that go into a movement. So when we say we build our watches, that's what we mean. We assemble these tiny parts in addition to assembling the entire watch in Detroit.
To make a watch in the United States is an unbelievable endeavor. Watches are the most complex product to make in regards to design, development, and manufacturing.
We want to make watches in Detroit. We will assemble the movements here. All the line employees that we hired, they've never assembled a watch. They've assembled cars maybe, but not watches.
People gonna buy watches that we made. It's gonna be a big deal to me.
Even though it is the beginning, you just want to put your best foot forward and try your best.
Ronda and Shinola have partnered to bring the knowledge of movement manufacturing to the United States, supporting Shinola in bringing high-quality watches to the market.
When they were training in the beginning, they would just go around the neck of the trainee and show with their own hands how to handle the parts.
They have this long checklist of, showing us like how actually this stuff works so we can troubleshoot it ourselves.
It's getting the best people that know what they're doing and bringing them all together to create something that's really unique in the United States.
All the components are produced in Switzerland. All we need is a proper assembly of the components. It's like on a car. A good car is only a good car if everything is good quality and assembled the right way. We can bring the knowledge, but the people are still the most important element. By the training they had from our crew, there is no reason why this quality that we have already achieved can be transferred to Detroit.
Everybody's pretty good. Like, I commend everybody. We're coming together every day. It's just like a team.
These people that are working in the factories and are building watches, and that's really the story. This is about the United States, and it's localizing jobs and building jobs not just in Detroit, but all across the country. This space was a big, raw, open concrete space, and now it's a watch factory.
So you guys are probably wondering how we ended up in that building. Like a lot of people, you hear stories about these great buildings in Detroit, you can get them for $10,000 on the auction, and it's not entirely true, certainly not anymore in Detroit. And yes, we do have a lot of buildings, old high schools or banks that are no longer in use and haven't been in use for quite some time, but those buildings need a ton of work. So we did have this fantasy at first of, wouldn't it be cool if we built a watch factory in an old high school? But it proved to be far more challenging than we anticipated. So when our founder, Tom, was touring Detroit and looking at different buildings, someone said, oh, you should check out the College for Creative Studies just to, perhaps partner with them, see what they're doing. And they were in the elevator. The story goes, the elevator stopped on the 5th floor, the doors open, and it was this big, amazing, empty space. And Rick Rogers, the president of the school, was in the elevator, and Tom asked him, what are you doing with this space? He said, well, we don't really have use for it right now. And he said, well, what am I doing looking at all these buildings? Why don't we build our watch factory right here? And so that's what we did. We now occupy 2 floors, and we've taken up all the free space in CCS. So, we now not only assemble the watches there, we also open a leather factory a year later, and we also assemble our audio products, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a bit. So here's a shot of the factory. When I first started, there were just a dozen people working in assembly, and now I think there's over 100 just working within watch assembly there. It all started with this ad. So when we launched, actually before we launched in 2012, when I started with the company, we had a brand website up, and we were on Twitter and Facebook. And we just started talking about what we were doing, talking about stories in Detroit, showing prototypes of bicycles and our leather, and really started building a groundswell around the brand long before we had products to sell, which is something you generally don't do, right? You don't start talking about product until you have product available to sell, which we didn't for a year. But that really allowed us to make that direct connection to the consumer. So we sort of leaped over the usual communication strategy of talking to the trades and then talking to consumer press. And we weren't going to advertise either. I introduced the brand to Partners in Spade, who continue to be our agency, our creative agency. And our founder said, well, what would it look like if we did do an ad? And so they came up with this. We all fell in love with it. It was a pretty bold statement considering at this stage we hadn't actually made a watch yet. But we felt pretty good about it. So we ran this ad in 4 places. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and the Detroit Free Press. By the end of the week, we had sold out of 2,500 watches that we hadn't made yet that people were prepaying for. So that was pretty impressive. And that was the first watch, the Runwell, which we continue to make today. There are a variety of styles within that category or within that SKU. We also have the Rambler, which we introduced after that, the Canfield, which is sort of an updated Runwell, and then the Guardian is our latest launch. And our women's watches, we have the Runwell, which is really our unisex. It can go either way. The Birdie is our first official women's watch that we launched, then the Canfield, the Cass, which is actually the name of the street that we're on. Nothing kind of goes, everything that we do has a rhyme and a reason behind it. So you might wonder, the Birdie, the Canfield, the Cass, the Gomelski, how does that fit in? Well, the Gomelski didn't have a name when we were going to Baselworld, which is sort of like the Super Bowl for watches and jewelry. So our founder said, fine, if you guys can't come up with a name, the first person I meet at Basel, that's what we're going to name it. So the first person he met was Victoria Gomelski, who is a writer in the industry. And he said, how do you feel about a watch being named after you? She thought he was kidding. And now the legacy continues. There are a number of styles within the Gomelski collection. This is Willie and Crystal. Willie was actually the voice in the first video I showed you. He started as a security guard in the building and was inquired about what we were doing on the 5th floor, and now he's a line leader. Crystal was actually a janitor in the building and has now moved up, and she leads the QC department. So watch straps. Originally, our watch straps were made in a factory in Florida called Hadley Roma. They couldn't keep up with our orders, so we said, okay, well, let's look into opening our own watch factory, strap factory here in Detroit. So we partnered with Barloba, who are a Swiss manufacturer. Again, they helped us set up the machines and the training. So today we manufacture the majority of our leather watch straps. We also do our small leather goods, as well as we just started doing a couple of the handbag styles. So again, I feel like it's mushroomed from the first day that we opened that factory, and now the whole space is filled. The Willard program, so we have roughly 50, now it's actually shifting, probably more so 60% of our business is direct, so e-com and our retail stores. We have 22 retail stores at the moment. We try to treat our retail stores different, so there's certainly consistency in design and certain elements like the Willard program, but we really are mindful of the city that it's in, the space that it's in. The Willard program is one of our surprise and delight things that we have in the store. You can go in and basically build your watch. So you can pick your watch head and your strap, and then the team there can put it together for you, and you have a watch that was built by you. We also have the Willard program online, so it's kind of similar to Nike ID. And there are various variations that you can do. Leather, so I mentioned we have the factory. In addition to that, we have our leather studio there. So all of our leather products are designed and developed right there on the 5th floor, which is really exciting. If anyone's familiar with the fashion industry, it's very rare these days to have your atelier, call it, or sample studio right in the same building where design is happening. So if you can imagine, the designers will come in that morning, have a sketch, and then the team can actually make a prototype of that bag by the end of that day. And here's some examples of our product. This is John and Richard. So across all of our categories, and I'll explain a little bit as to why we're in so many different categories, we find experts in the field. So in this case, John and Richard used to have their own line called Lambertson and Truex. They then led the team at Tiffany, developing their leather collection and building it to, I think, a $50 million business, which has now since grown. And they were sort of in retirement when we knocked on their door and said, would you be interested in leading our leather division? And so they came on board. They split their time between New York and Detroit. And they really are an amazing design talent that's helped evolve our collection. When we first started, it was just small leather goods, journal covers, tech items, and now we've expanded to have a full collection for men and women. Bicycles, same thing. We have a wonderful woman named Sky Yeager. If you Google her, she's a rock star in that world. We assemble all of our bikes in our Detroit store. That's what you're seeing there. Our first bike, also called the Runwell. And this is the Runwell Ladies. This is our single speed, the Aero, and the Bixby, which has more of a vintage feel. There's Sky and Richard Schwinn. So we do all the assembly in Detroit. Richard is from the famed Schwinn family, makers of bikes. Back in the 80s, they had to sell their company, but they held on to one of their factories called Waterford. And so they only make custom bikes in the Waterford facility. And they also make our frame and fork. So they're made by those guys there and then shipped to Detroit for assembly.
We're committed to the idea of making bikes in America. It's perfect for Shinola to be associated with an American icon like Waterford.
Bicycles are a great way to learn technology. They're one of the most demanding examples of any technology that's out there. We come closer with our steel bikes to the technological limit of bicycle design.
Waterford is it's a small shop. Everything's all one-off. It's very interesting to be able to come in here and actually see your bike, if you wanted to, being made.
They don't see the guys' welds, they don't see the miters, they don't see all the little details, the way the tubes have to be cut, the way the little brazons are fitted on. A lot of that just goes away when you paint the frame. The integrity of the welder is very important. The experience of the welder is very important. And Shinola only wants to bring to market high quality products. So we feel really lucky to be able to make frames here.
Well, we have two models of bicycles by Shinola. The Runwell is the flagship model. It's a lugged steel frame, and it has an 11-speed drivetrain on it. The other bike is the Bixby. It's a 3-speed, and it's a TIG welded frame, so it's a little more shapely. It's got the curved top tube, and then it has a 3-speed internal hub.
We want people to look at their bikes not just as a ride, but as an investment. Our ability to produce bikes in larger quantities like we're doing for Shinola are terrific. That's something that makes us really excited. That's what makes this project really special.
And then paper. So as you guys received today, we do notebooks. They're made in a factory in Ann Arbor called Edward Malloy Brothers. They've been in the bookbindery business for quite some time. The paper's made from sustainable American forests. And we're really, gaining some ground. We're certainly not quite at the size of moleskin, but we are definitely gaining some ground there, sold at Barnes & Noble and other locations, museum stores, etc. So it's a nice entry point into the brand. It's our lowest price point product, which gives people an opportunity to have a piece of the brand if they're not necessarily in the market for a $700 watch or a $900 bag. And then audio. So last year, our founder looked at what Beats was doing. And if you ask any audiophile, for the price of Beats, the sound quality is really not worth the price. So our founder said, well, how do we do that, do it better, have audiophile quality sound with the Shinola design aesthetic? So we decided to get in the audio business. We started with a turntable. It's absolutely gorgeous, not just saying it because I work there, but it is stunning. We found a guy named Alex Rawson, who is a guy who had a high-end headphone business that he sold to Warner Brothers. He brought Harry Rosenfeld, I believe is his last name, from VPI to help us with the turntable. You'll see him in the video. And we launched audio, and hopefully headphones will come out this year in November.
When I began in this industry, almost all the manufacturers were here in the US. We made all this stuff. It's really nice that we can make stuff here again. I wanted to make a turntable that could reproduce exactly what was on the record and not change it. Make it sound just like the master tape. The best engineering is done quickly. Take a napkin, sit down over lunch with a guy who knows really how to machine stuff, and he looks at it and he says, I can do that.
Which happens with a shop such as ours. We're taking those hand sketches, relating them into precision components to reflect the sound that the stylist gives out. It's all about the guy making it and setting up a precision process.
Our goal is to recreate what the artist intended, and to do so, you need accuracy and precision. These platters of aluminum are precise down to the micron. Thankfully, Mark, with his experience making laser optics and working with NASA parts, he can actually hit that.
We spent a lot of time on this. This has taken way longer than we normally take. There was a lot of, let's get this exactly right. Let's make sure that the angle is exactly right. Just like the watch. You can never make plastic sound real.
What makes a good turntable is the lack of noise. Therefore, you have big blocks of aluminum to absorb vibration so that it doesn't hit that cartridge. We've managed to attract some of the best talent in the electrical engineering industry who work closely with American Board in designing and developing these circuits to create this phono preamp for the Runwell turntable. After MDI is done machining top plates and platters in the tone arm, those will be shipped to Detroit at our factory. This is the right time for manufacturing world-class audio products in Detroit, considering the level of skill and craftsmen and artisans that we have in this city. We're starting with Turntable to pay respect to the history of recorded music. We want to take the journey from the start.
I love it because this is what they're supposed to have. They're not supposed to have disposable junk. It's enough disposable junk. This is a real turntable.
It feels like Detroit is calling us to do something special here, and this is just the start.
In addition to launching audio, we also partnered with Pamela Love, who's a great jewelry designer out of New York, to make jewelry. As we continue to introduce more product for women, this is a great opportunity, again, to expand the brand and create another window into the brand through jewelry. I'm going quickly now because we're running out of time. Clocks and power cords, we partnered with GE to create these products. The power cords are gorgeous. You're probably like, why do power cords? But once you see them in person, you'll see what I mean. They're in stores now. And then Shinola Cola. This we originally created. I know, right? And then another thing. This we originally created just for events. We worked with Town Club, which is a local company out of Detroit. They made a special flavor for us, so this is a Shinola specific flavor. I don't drink soda, but I heard it kind of tastes like Dr. Pepper. And now we're selling these in Whole Foods, as well as smaller accounts, as well as continuing to use it for stores. And the Shinola Hotel. So if you've ever been to Detroit, it's changing now, but there's definitely a shortage of hotels, and certainly there's not really a boutique hotel. So our founder decided to create one. So we partnered with Bedrock, which is a local development company. Dan Gilbert, you might be familiar with his name. And we're working on finding an operator, and NoHo Partners, who are doing the food and beverage. So that will take actually that big building and then the 2 buildings next to it. And it will open the end of next year, soft open, and then be open in time officially, auto show January 2019. And we're also, the intention is that eventually everything that's in the room, the bed, the fixtures, et cetera, you can purchase. There'll be Shinola furniture, lamps, et cetera. And our retail stores, that's our first store in Detroit and our second store in New York. And here's just a little sampling. I'll go quickly through. And then our marketing. So I'm very lucky. The story is really resonating, of course, in Michigan and in Detroit, but even nationally and internationally. So we get a great deal of earned media. These are some of the numbers. I have some in for 2017. They just don't happen to be here. So though we have a small media budget, we're very careful and calculated as to how we spend those dollars. And then we're lucky now going into our 4th year that we continue to get a good deal of earned media. And adding those categories does help because it keeps the heat around the brand. This was our second ad. So you may remember Detroit announced bankruptcy. We had no idea that that was going to happen. 2013. And so a few days after that announcement, we came out with this ad. It also happened to be the introduction of that watch, which is called the Birdie. This was poking fun at the Apple Watch. So when they launched, we came out with this ad. I had a friend who worked there at the time who just texted me, cheeky. So we definitely have an irreverent voice with our marketing that, again, speaks louder than the budget. And then last year, we wanted to celebrate, at that time, the 500+ jobs that we had created. So we came out with a campaign. Also happened to be an election year where jobs was a hot topic, but certainly something that has always been at the core of the Shinola brands from the beginning. In 2014, we worked with Bruce Weber, the fashion photographer. He created this amazing campaign. This is when we started to introduce more female products and felt like we needed to have a campaign that really spoke to women that you could see in, let's say, a Vogue magazine. So we worked with him. He shot a cast of characters from Detroit alongside Carolyn Murphy, who's also our women's design director. And here's a great film that he did for us.
You know what? I think that when it comes to Detroit, I view it just how I view love. Like, I feel like in everything you have like a soulmate, right? If I had to just give like one line about the city of Detroit, I would most definitely say that I belong here, and it is definitely a soulmate of mine. I was working on this poem a few days ago, and it's about the city of Detroit, but it's how it breeds like greatness, great kids, yes, great boys, great girls, how we grow up to be great men and women. And I wanted to read it to you.
Okay.
That's fine. Somewhere in the projects, there's a kid working on a project to project to the world. He lives in a city that grows boys and girls into lions and tigers, a city that takes the fire and the ashes, builds, rebuilds, turns abandoned houses and empty fields into things worth looking at, a place that never looks back, the center stage of a nation, the heartbeat, the patience, the music, the Motown, the Midtown, the downtown, the always come back around, where we fight for our reputation, walk, ride, bike to our destination, practice patient knows that they can't forget about us. Detroit, the city that continues to call the world's bluff. Somewhere there's a kid working on a project to project from a city that's rebuilding, that we building from the ashes together so that everywhere there can be Detroit.
Beautiful. God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
We also last minute ran that ad just before the second debate last year that also got a great traction on social. And this is our current campaign, Let's Roll Up Our Sleeves. So it started with a big out-of-home blitz in New York, which garnered a great deal of earned media, which was our intention. The second phase of this introduces 4 individuals that we profiled that are really change makers in their community. We have print that also is running alongside this campaign. I don't have phase 2 in here because it literally just launched. I have some examples of what the print's going to look like here. That's Britt Gilmore from the Giving Keys, Nadine Burke-Harris from San Francisco, Kevin Adler from Miracle Messages, and Richard Garcia, who actually started a farm, Alma Backyard Farms in Compton, LA. So you can see their stories on our site. It would take me a whole other half hour to really talk about all the great work that they're doing. And now it's time for Q&A.